Most men think relationships fall apart because of something big, a fight, a betrayal, a clear moment where everything breaks. But that's not how it actually happens. Most of the time, she checks out long before she ever leaves, and you don't even notice it happening. You're still showing up, still talking, still doing what you think is enough. From your perspective, nothing has really changed, but in her head, the entire story has already been rewritten. She's gone over every moment, every small disappointment, every time. Something felt missing, not in one dramatic breakdown, but in quiet, repeated thoughts that slowly shift how she sees you. And the worst part is she doesn't tell you. Not because she doesn't care, but because the things that matter most to her are the things she feels you should already understand. The moment she has to explain them, they lose their meaning. So instead of asking, she watches. She waits. She hopes you'll notice without being told. You don't. So the gap grows. At first, it's small. You might feel a slight distance, maybe a change in her tone, a subtle shift in how she responds to you. But it's easy to ignore because nothing is obviously wrong. There's no clear problem to fix, no argument to point to, just a quiet feeling that something isn't the same. Then over time, that feeling becomes her reality. She starts investing less, not in a dramatic way, but gradually. The energy she used to give freely becomes controlled. The excitement turns into routine. The little things she used to appreciate now feel expected instead of meaningful. And you're still trying to figure out what changed. And this is where most men lose the relationship without realizing it. Not because they didn't care, but because they didn't understand what was happening beneath the surface. They were focused on what was being said, while everything important was happening in what wasn't. By the time she finally says something, if she even does, it's not the beginning of the problem, it's the end of it. So if you've ever felt like something just faded without a clear reason, like she slowly pulled away and you couldn't explain why, it wasn't random. You just didn't see it while it was happening. You've probably been told that communication is the key to making a relationship work, that if something is wrong, she'll say it, that if she needs something, she'll ask, that if you just listen closely enough, you'll understand exactly what's going on. That sounds good in theory, but in reality, it's not how things play out. There's a hidden rule most men never learn, and it's the reason so many relationships slowly fall apart without a clear explanation. The things she wants the most are the things she's least likely to say out loud. Not because she's trying to be difficult, because asking changes the meaning. Think about it like this: if she has to tell you exactly how to show up for her, then it stops feeling natural. It stops feeling like something you wanted to do. It starts feeling like something she had to guide, remind, or even manage. And the moment it feels managed, it loses emotional weight. That's why she'll stay quiet. She would rather go without something than feel like she had to request it just to get it. From the outside, it can look confusing. You might think everything is fine because she isn't complaining. But internally, she's keeping track of every moment where something was missing, not in a dramatic way, in a quiet, consistent way that builds over time. This is where most men misread the situation completely. They assume silence means satisfaction. They assume that if there's no problem being spoken about, then there is no problem at all. But silence in this context doesn't mean everything is good. It means she's observing. She's paying attention to how you act without direction. She's noticing what you pick up on and what you don't. She's watching whether you move with awareness or whether you need everything explained before you act. And that observation shapes how she feels about you. Not instantly, but gradually. Every time she feels like she has to lower her expectations or ignore something that matters to her, a small shift happens. It's not enough to cause a reaction right away, but it's enough to change how she experiences the relationship. Over time, those small shifts add up, and by the time the distance becomes obvious, it didn't start there. It started in all the moments where she stayed quiet and you assumed everything was fine. Once you understand that she won't always say what she needs, everything starts to make more sense. Because at that point, it's no longer about waiting for instructions, it's about understanding how attraction and emotional connection actually work beneath the surface. Most men approach relationships logically. If something is wrong, fix it. If something is missing, add it. If she needs something, she'll tell you. That way of thinking works in a lot of areas in life, but not here. Because what drives her response to you isn't logic first, it's feeling, and feeling doesn't wait for explanation. Her brain is constantly picking up on how you show up, not just what you say, but how you carry yourself, how you respond to situations, how aware you are of what's happening around you. These things create an emotional reaction before any conscious thought has time to form. That's why two men can do the same thing but get completely different reactions. One feels natural, the other feels forced. One feels effortless, the other feels like he's trying too hard. The difference isn't in the action itself, it's in how it's delivered. And that delivery comes from awareness. When yes, you're aware, you don't need to be told what to do in every situation. You notice shifts. You pick up on small changes. You respond in a way that feels aligned with the moment instead of waiting for direction. That's what creates a sense of connection, not perfection. Not saying the right words every time, but consistently showing that you understand without needing everything spelled out. This is where attraction either builds or slowly fades. If she feels like you're tuned in, like you're paying attention to what matters without being guided, it creates a sense of ease. She doesn't feel like she has to manage the experience. She doesn't feel like she has to fill in the gaps. But if that awareness is missing, the opposite happens. She starts doing more internally, thinking more, adjusting more, compensating for what's not being picked up. And over time, that creates a subtle form of exhaustion, not because the relationship is bad, but because it doesn't feel balanced. And balance is what keeps attraction stable. Without it, even small things start to feel heavier than they should. And that's when the shift begins. Not in one big moment, but in a series of small moments where something just didn't land the way it should have. This is where the first real disconnect usually shows up, and it almost always gets misunderstood. She's overwhelmed. Something is clearly on her mind. And from your perspective, the natural thing to do is help her solve it. You listen, you analyze, you start offering solutions. You try to fix whatever is bothering her because that's how you're wired to handle problems. On paper, that makes perfect sense. But in that moment, fixing isn't what she's looking for. And this is where most men get it wrong without realizing it. When she's overthinking, when her mind is running through multiple things at once, she's not always trying to reach a solution. She's trying to feel grounded again. She's trying to come out of that mental noise and return to a sense of stability. What she actually responds to you in that moment is presence, not words, not advice. Presence. It's the difference between sitting across from her trying to figure everything out and simply being there in a way that feels steady. When you slow down, when you don't rush to speak, when your energy stays calm instead of reactive, it changes how she experiences the moment because now she's not dealing with the problem alone. She's feeling supported without needing to explain what that support should look like. Most men miss this because they're focused on doing something useful. They want to add value, to contribute, to show that they care by solving the issue. But the problem is that approach keeps everything in her head. It doesn't bring her out of it. What shifts her state is when she feels something different from you. Calmness, stability, a sense that you're not affected by the chaos she's feeling, and that allows her to settle without pressure. And this is where awareness becomes important again. You have to notice when she's not looking for answers. You have to recognize when the situation isn't about logic, but about how she feels in that moment. That shift in understanding changes your response completely. Instead of trying to lead the conversation, you lead the energy. Instead of filling the silence, you allow it, and that creates something. Most men don't provide relief, not because you fixed anything, but because you didn't add more noise to what she was already trying to process. And over time, moments like that carry more weight than any solution you could have, given because they make her feel understood without needing to explain herself. There's another layer to this that most men overlook, and it seems small on the surface, but it carries more weight than you realize. It's how you acknowledge her as an individual, not in a general way, not in a routine, automatic way, but in a way that feels specific to her. This is where a lot of connection either strengthens or fades without either of you noticing it in the moment. Over time, familiarity creates shortcuts. You start using the same words, the same tone, the same patterns of interaction. It becomes comfortable, predictable, easy to maintain. But that same familiarity can also make things feel less personal. She stops feeling like she stands out in your world. And that's where the shift begins. Because what she responds to isn't just attention, it's recognition. The sense that you see her clearly, not just as someone in your life, but as someone distinct, someone who isn't interchangeable with anyone else. This shows up in small ways. How you speak to her, how you refer to her, how you respond in moments that aren't planned or rehearsed. When you default to generic language, it blends everything together. It feels safe, but it also feels replaceable. It doesn't create a strong emotional response because it doesn't feel specific. But when your attention is more focused, when your words reflect that you're actually tuned into her as an individual, it changes how she receives it. It feels more real. Not because the words are different, but because the intention behind them is clear. Most men don't think about this because it doesn't seem like a big deal. They assume that as long as they're being consistent, as long as they're showing up, it's enough. But consistency without depth becomes routine. And routine without variation slowly loses impact. What keeps connection strong is the feeling that she still stands out to you, that she hasn't just become part of your everyday environment. And this doesn't require anything complicated. It requires awareness, being present enough to notice details, to respond in ways that reflect those details, to show that your attention isn't just there, but that it's focused. Because when that level of recognition, it reinforces something important, that she matters in a way that isn't generic. And that feeling is what keeps her emotionally connected, even in moments where nothing big is happening. Without it, things don't collapse immediately. They just slowly lose their depth. And this is where a different kind of mistake starts to show up, and it usually comes from misunderstanding what confidence actually looks like. You've probably heard that being secure means not reacting, not getting affected, staying completely unbothered no matter what's happening around you. So when another man shows interest in her, you step back, stay neutral, and act like it doesn't matter. From your perspective, that feels controlled. But from her perspective, it can feel like something else entirely, because there's a difference between being grounded and being disengaged. When there's no reaction at all, when you act like nothing is happening, even when it's obvious, it doesn't always read as confidence. Sometimes it reads as a lack of investment, like you're not paying enough attention to even notice what's going on. And that creates a subtle disconnect. At the same time, going in the opposite direction doesn't help either. Overreacting, getting tense, trying to assert yourself aggressively, or turning the situation into something bigger than it needs to be, that shifts the energy in a different way. Now it feels unstable, and instability breaks traction just as quickly. So the balance is in the middle. You acknowledge what's happening without losing control of yourself. Your presence stays steady. Your body language doesn't tighten. Your tone doesn't change. But there's a quiet awareness in how you carry yourself that makes it clear you're not disconnected from the moment. You're just not threatened by it. And that's the part that matters. because confidence isn't about ignoring everything around you. It's about staying composed while being fully aware of it. When she feels that, it creates a sense of security, not because you said anything, but because your behavior communicates that you're present, you understand the situation, and you're not shaken by it. That combination is what makes it feel real, not forced, not exaggerated, just controlled. Most men miss this because they think they have to pick one extreme or the other, either react strongly or not react at all. But both approaches come from the same place, focusing on the situation instead of staying grounded in yourself. And once you shift that focus, everything changes. You're no longer reacting to what's happening. You're simply responding in a way that reflects who you are, regardless of what's happening around you. And that's what keeps the dynamic stable, not control over the situation, but control over yourself within it. This is where something deeper starts to affect the dynamic, and it's one of the biggest reasons attraction slowly fades without either of you realizing why. It's not about what you're doing wrong, it's about what you're no longer doing. The beginning, everything felt intentional. You paid attention to details. You made an effort to create moments. You showed up in a way that felt active. There was a sense that you were choosing her, not just being with her. That's what made the connection feel alive. But over time, that effort becomes less consistent. Not because you stopped caring, but because you got comfortable. You assume things are stable, so you relax. You stop initiating as much. You stop creating new moments and you rely on the connection to carry itself. And that's where the shift begins. Because while you're settling into comfort, she's noticing the difference. Not in one big moment, but in small patterns. The way conversations feel more routine, the way interactions become predictable, the absence of the little things that used to make her feel chosen. And this is where most men misunderstand what's happening. They think attraction fades because of time, but it doesn't. It fades because the energy that created it isn't being maintained. When the sense of pursuit disappears completely, the dynamic changes. It stops feeling like something that's actively growing and starts feeling like something that's just existing. And existence alone isn't enough to keep emotional connection strong. She doesn't need constant effort or grand gestures. She needs consistency in how you show up, small reminders that you're still paying attention, still engaged, still choosing her in the present, not just relying on the past. That's what keeps attraction steady. Without it, things don't break immediately, they just lose intensity. The connection becomes familiar but not exciting, comfortable but not engaging. And over time, that lack of engagement creates distance that feels hard to explain because nothing is technically wrong, but something is missing. And that missing piece is what most men don't notice until it's too late. The difference between a strong connection and a fading one isn't dramatic, it's in the consistency of your actions, not how much you do, but how often you remind her through your behavior that she still matters in the same way she did at the beginning. Because when that reminder disappears, so does the feeling that made everything work in the first place. There's another shift that happens quietly, and it changes how she experiences you on a deeper level. It's not just about attention or effort anymore, it's about how clearly you express what you feel. Most men hold back more than they realize. Not because they don't feel anything, but because they filter it. They keep things general, safe, predictable. Compliments stay surface level, reactions stay controlled, and anything that feels too direct gets softened before it's ever said. From their perspective, that feels like the right move. It avoids awkwardness. It avoids saying too much. It keeps everything balanced. But what it also does is remove intensity. And without intensity, attraction doesn't fully develop. She doesn't just want to hear that she looks good or that you enjoy being around her. Those things are expected. They don't stand out because they don't feel specific. They don't feel like they're coming from a place that's fully engaged. What creates a stronger response is clarity. When what you say reflects that you're actually paying attention, that you're noticing details, that your reaction to her isn't generic but tied to something real in the moment, that's what makes it land differently. Because now it doesn't feel like something you could say to anyone, it feels like something you're saying because of her. Most men don't realize how much this matters. They assume that consistency is enough, that as long as they're positive and respectful, it will carry the connection forward. But consistency without depth becomes predictable, and predictability reduces emotional impact. That's where things start to feel flat. Not bad, not negative, just less engaging than they could be when you express what you feel more directly without overthinking it or filtering it down to something safer. It changes the dynamic. It brings more presence into the interaction. It makes the moment feel more real instead of routine. And that's what keeps attraction active. It's not about saying more, it's about saying what actually reflects your experience in that moment. Because when your words match what you genuinely feel instead of what you think you should say, they carry more weight. And over time, that weight builds. It creates a sense that you're fully engaged, not holding back, not operating on autopilot, just present. And that presence is what makes her feel something beyond the surface level. Without it, everything still works. It just doesn't feel the same. Now, this is where everything either holds together or quietly starts to fall apart. Because by this point, it's no longer about individual moments, it's about consistency. Most men don't realize how much inconsistency affects how she feels over time. Not in obvious ways, not in ways that trigger immediate reactions, but in small shifts that slowly change the overall dynamic. One day you're present, calm, engaged. Everything feels natural. She feels comfortable, connected, like she can relax around you. Then another day, your energy is different. Maybe you're distracted. Maybe you're slightly off. Maybe you're not as tuned in as you were before. It's not dramatic, but it's noticeable. And those small differences start to add up because, from her perspective, it creates uncertainty. Not about one specific moment, but about what to expect from you. When your behavior isn't consistent, she starts adjusting internally. She becomes more aware, more cautious, more observant of how you're showing up. Instead of feeling settled, she feels like she has to read the situation every time. And that changes how she experiences the connection. It becomes less stable. Not because something is wrong, but because it doesn't feel predictable in a grounded way. Now, here's where most men misunderstand consistency. They think it means doing the same things over and over again, saying the same things, acting the same way, maintaining the same patterns. But that's not real consistency. That's repetition. Real consistency is about your state, the way you carry yourself, the level of awareness you bring, the way you respond to situations. Those things should feel steady even when the circumstances change. That's what creates a sense of reliability. She knows what she's getting from you, not because everything is scripted, but because your presence doesn't fluctuate based on small changes around you. And that stability is what allows attraction to deepen. Without it, even positive moments lose their impact because they don't feel like part of a pattern. They feel isolated, good in the moment, but not something she can rely on long term. Over time, that creates distance, not sudden, not dramatic, just gradual. And by the time it becomes noticeable, it's hard to trace back to where it started because it didn't start with one big mistake. It started with inconsistency. Small, repeated shifts that slowly changed how she felt until the connection no longer felt the way it used to. And that's what makes it so easy to miss and so difficult to fix once it's already happened. At this point, everything comes down to one thing, not what you know, but how you apply it. Because understanding all of this doesn't automatically change anything. You can recognize every pattern, every shift, every subtle signal, and still end up in the same position if your behavior doesn't reflect that awareness. That's where most men get stuck. They learn, they understand, but they don't adjust how they move in real time. They still wait for clarity instead of reading what's already there. They still overthink instead of staying present. They still react instead of staying grounded. And because of that, nothing really changes. The truth is, none of what we talked about requires anything extreme. It doesn't require you to become someone different or to force anything unnatural. It requires you to be more aware of what's already happening and to respond in a way that aligns with it. That's it. But doing that consistently is what separates understanding from results. Because in the moment, it's easy to fall back into old patterns. You don't go back to overanalyzing, to second guessing, to waiting for something more obvious before you act. And that hesitation is where opportunities disappear, not in a dramatic way, in small, unnoticed moments where something could have shifted but didn't. That's how most connections fade. Not through one big mistake, but through a series of missed moments where awareness wasn't applied. And by the time you realize it, you're left trying to figure out what went wrong, when in reality, nothing went wrong in one specific place. It was just a lack of consistency in how you showed up. So the real shift isn't in learning more, it's in applying what you already understand, paying attention to the details instead of waiting for something obvious, staying present instead of drifting into your head, responding to what's actually happening instead of what you think should be happening. Because once you start doing that, everything becomes clearer. You stop guessing, you stop missing things that were always there, and you start moving with a level of awareness most people never develop. That's what changes the outcome, not effort, not luck, just clarity applied consistently. You don't lose her because you didn't care. You lose her because you didn't see what mattered while it was still happening.